All right, welcome to Unit 2. Let's talk about power. So what is power? For the purposes of conversation in this class, we're going to talk about power as the ability to influence actions, beliefs, or behaviors of others. People work through those sites of socialization that we've talked about, those social forces, to influence the meanings that we give to things in the world, the ways we live those meanings and those identities, and the ways that we perform our identities. So we've talked a lot about gender performance in the past week. Our ideas about what to expect from ourselves and what to expect from others, what's normal and what's abnormal, in terms just of gender performance, is influenced by the people in our lives who hold power, who hold that ability to influence us. At the beginning of this semester, I talked about culture as these webs of influence that intersect different parts of our lives and connect us to other people. Power can also be thought of in that exact same way. Each of the social forces or sites of socialization is a locus of power, a center of power, with influential and dominant people, voices, and perspectives. Importantly, power is also unnamed and invisible. In the Gender and Power podcast you were going to listen to from TED Radio this week, they talk about how a lot of the ways that we construct sentences and so construct reality around gender violence erases the people who perpetuate that violence. And that's just one of the many ways that power is made invisible in our society. We often don't talk directly about the people who wield power or how they wield that power. So let's talk about who is powerful. Who sits at the nexuses of those social forces, those sites of socialization that influence us? In your family, who is there a matriarch or a patriarch or a person who sets the expectations and norms at family gatherings? Often when we look into who holds power, who holds that influence over our actions, our beliefs, and our behavior, we find that there are a limited range of lived experiences among the people at the nexuses, at the center of those webs of power. And one really interesting example of how to work around that, to work through that system, to change who holds power, is actually visible in the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and that's why I assigned her one of the great obituaries about her in your course materials this week. But one of the remarkable things about Justice Ginsburg, before she was a judge, before she was a Supreme Court justice, is that she was a lawyer who worked through the ACLU to expand women's rights. But at that time, she was making these cases to courts, both the Supreme Court and lower courts, that were dominated by men who didn't have the lived experience, who may have struggled to connect with the lived experiences of women who faced a lot of structural discrimination built into the legal system at that time. Now, to dismantle those structures, Ruth Bader Ginsburg very, very, very cleverly used the examples of men who were negatively affected by the gender roles that had been codified into those laws. We've talked about gender roles and gender performance, and one of the ways that in the U.S. gender roles were codified into law is that caretaker positions in households and in communities were typically expected to be held by women. So if a family member got sick, the government would support, to a certain extent, a caretaker for that person. If a husband got sick, the government would support his wife in taking care of her. But the government did not support a husband who needed help providing care for a sick wife. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg took exactly that case, that type of case, to court, and was able to prevail on the lived experiences of men who could identify with this other man who was experiencing gender discrimination, and overturn those sexist expectations that had been codified into law. So let's talk about how power works. Power works in three specific ways that we're going to talk about in this class. Power constitutes, it forms our identities, what we think of as options for identity labels, what we think that those labels mean. Power also regulates our identities, what's good, what's bad, what's normal, what's abnormal. And in that way, power perpetuates inequality in our relationships to ourselves and to others. As you're going to watch in the second video this week on the next group project, we're going to be talking a lot about popular media in the coming weeks in this course, and it's going to references to popular media are going to be a major part of your next group project. So let's think about the way that power works within popular media. Let's talk about how does power constitute identities? What sort of identities appear in popular media? What sort of identities aren't there? So in that way, popular media and the people who produce popular media have the power to compose or to make real, to make normal certain types of identities and leave others out. Power also regulates our identity. So let's think about the way that popular media producers give meaning to identity categories. What was expected of, for example, straight men or gay men within popular media? What are the expectations for behavior that we see promoted in popular media? How does media limit or expand the possibilities for identity performance? And how does media teach us to react to various types of identity and performance? Is there a laugh track over something that a gay man or a trans person says? Are we meant to think that those types of people are funny? Or are we encouraged to take them seriously and take their identities seriously? And finally, power perpetuates inequality within our relationships. And in anthropology, we're particularly concerned about power and inequality. We're going to continue to discuss this throughout the rest of Unit 2. But thinking of our media example, how does media portray some identities as better, more important, or preferable to others? And how does media portray inequalities themselves as normal or expected? I also want to take a moment to talk about how power, dominance, and work to shape our ideas around intent and impact. Often when we start to call out powerful people and powerful institutions for perpetuating inequality, for limiting the ways that we can think about or live our identities, the reaction of the powerful is to emphasize that they didn't intend to perpetuate inequality, rather than the impact of their actions, which is the perpetuation of inequality in a lot of cases. So, for example, maybe a songwriter doesn't intend to perpetuate sexist stereotypes through their music, or a TV production team doesn't intend to perpetuate racism or racial inequality through their show. But if that's the impact of their work and the media that they produce, that's important, and it shouldn't be ignored or downplayed. Now, I don't have a quote for the end of this video because I know the 2 videos this week are running a bit long. There's a very powerful quote at the end of the Project 2 video, so go watch that.